Hey everybody. Can't stop doing it. Sean and Kelly Price here. Today we're doing a little quiz.
Yes.
It's going to be great. So we're going to ask the question, we're going to outline different factors of a house, and we're going to say, does this affect the market value, the appraised value, or neither?
Yeah. So we're going to see how good you are at determining what factors determine the value of a home.
What really matters. And that matters like how you want to price your house if you're a seller, and how you want to offer on a house if you're a buyer.
Yep. And the market. Okay.
And the market.
Okay.
So the first one we have here is...
All right. The first one is, as a seller, quite often we have sellers say that they want to price their home based on what they paid for the home. So does what a seller pays for the home affect the market value or the appraised value of the home?
We also have buyers that do some research on their own, and they see what the seller paid for that house, and so they also want to offer based on what that seller paid for the house, even though they don't know all the other factors that went into it.
That's right. So does that determine market value or appraised value? Quick clarification, market value. Market value is the value that a seller is willing to sell a home at and a buyer is willing to buy a home at. That's what a market value is.
It's like a reasonable expectation of the price
of a transaction. Yep.
Correct.
The appraised value is the value that an appraiser gives to a home based on comparable homes and what they sold for. So the appraised value is a little bit of a historical value, whereas market value is current. So in a growing market or in a seller's market, appraised value can run behind and be lower than market value. And in a buyer's market, it can be the opposite. It can actually be more.
That's right. But now an appraiser will take into account on the appraisal a little bit of, they'll notate, was this a declining market or not? So there's a little bit of thinking that, not that they don't think a lot, appraisers think a whole lot.
Great.
You know, like,
okay. Hopefully
love
no
you,
appraisers are watching this.
appraisers.
Okay. All right. So question one, are we going to give the answers as we go, or are we going to come back and give the answers? Give them time to think.
Yeah, let's think about it.
Okay.
So is how much a seller paid for the house going to affect their market value, the appraised value, or neither? Okay. Number two, how much money the seller put into the house. So this isn't just what they paid for it. What did they put in upgrades? What
did they
kind of upgrades?
Yeah. What kind of work? Right? Did they? And some sellers will say, "Hey, I put $350,000 in this house. So does that give it $350,000 in value?" Yeah. We'll see when we come back and give you the answer. Okay. Number three. How much the seller needs to make on the house, or from the other side, how much the buyer needs to spend and can spend. Does that affect what the actual value of a property is?
Of either of these, of what they should market it for, what they should offer on it, and what the appraiser is going to say it's actually worth.
That's right.
Okay. Number four, what a similar, there's no word there. What a similar in the same neighborhood sold for. What a similar home in the same neighborhood sold for. Okay. That's obvious, right? Is that going to affect market, appraisal,
don't give away the answer.
Or both?
Can't be obvious. You have to be challenged.
Consider yourself challenged.
Okay. What a larger or smaller home in the same neighborhood sold for. Is that going to affect market value or appraised value?
This question from the department, the redundancy department of redundancy.
Yes, apparently. Okay.
I didn't do this.
I wrote this. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Next.
Brilliant. You always
Thanks,
write all the
baby.
good things.
Thanks, baby.
Okay. Buyer demand versus supply. Market value, appraisal value, or neither.
That's another redundant. You already gave that answer. Were you paying attention earlier? Because you just got the answer to that one. And number seven, number of bedrooms and number of bathrooms in the home. Does that affect market value, appraised value, or neither? Okay. So those seven questions.
I think there's another one.
What's that?
Whether it's a FSBO or they hired an agent.
Yeah.
Market value.
Appraised value.
That was smart. That was a good one to ask.
Good. Yeah, that was good. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a really good one.
Market value, appraised value.
Okay, so those are 8 questions. So now let's see what the answers to these questions are. You go number 1.
Let's go back to 1. What the seller paid for the house, that is appraised value.
If the sale happened close to the time that you are buying it, it was 10 years ago, it really doesn't matter. But if it was in a recent sale, then it's gonna affect the appraised value.
But that's only gonna be because it's gonna factor into the comps usually. So comps are gonna be distance, like property and time of sale, right? But if it's outside of that window, it really doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
And that's a key point too, because as soon as somebody buys the house, the market price becomes the appraised value of that home. So that home now appraises at that amount.
So let me say this, buyers. When you buy a home, you definitely want to get a good deal. You don't want to pay too much for a house. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But do consider when you really, really love it and you're so close, don't get in your head about offering a little bit more, because you're moving into a neighborhood where the higher you pay for this house, you've just increased everyone's property values, including your own. Not just the perceived market values, but the actual appraised value of everyone's home.
Because the next market that goes on the house, yours is going to be a comp, so that one's going to comp at or higher.
Yeah, and impress the neighbors.
That's right, that's right. Okay, what's the next one?
Okay.
How much the seller put into the house. Okay, so that can affect market value. It can affect appraised value. It could affect neither. It has to be strategic what you put in the house. We've done a lot of videos on this. Next week's quiz, we're going to go through different expenses putting into a property, and we're going to determine, does it improve it, does it not? So that's going to be a really interesting
We're going to
one.
say, does it, okay, I'm
so
excited about that one.
Okay, all right, number 3.
How much the seller needs to make on the house. You seller, you bought it for this at this time, you put this much money into it, maybe you made good decisions, maybe you made bad decisions, but you got a lot of debt in it. Maybe there's all kinds of stuff going on and your dog just needed to have bladder stone removal surgery and may have to have 5 others and is on a special diet.
And so you've got to make $500,000 on this house. Does that matter? No.
It matters to neither.
No.
I'm sorry.
And on the buyer side, you know, I only want to pay this amount for this house. That doesn't matter unless you get a desperate seller. So that doesn't matter.
Okay. 4, what a similar house in the same neighborhood sold for. Is this market, appraisal, or neither?
That's perfect, both.
All of it.
That's the comp, that's the market value, that's everything.
Yeah.
So,
that's everything. Okay, what a larger or smaller home in the neighborhood sold for.
Okay, so it's not a direct comparison, but an appraiser could use properties that were close if they were similar, even though they're larger or smaller, but they make adjustments to the appraised value based on these sizes.
But there's always the 5 more feet rule that we have in our family. A neighborhood can change its whole mood and attitude by just going 5 more feet.
Yes.
Which means like
one
block over.
We forgot location.
Location's everything, bro.
Location's everything.
Everything.
Yes. That we just
Market.
that was
Appraised.
a bonus. Okay.
Yeah.
Next. All right. I'm taking
I think you did a really bad job.
I did a bad job of these. All right. Listen. What's up?
Got you, baby.
Buyer demand versus supply. So
Everything.
this determines market value, and it can affect appraised value because they're going to look at the ups and downs of the market and maybe adjust a little bit. But for the most part, if there's a lot of demand for a property and there's a bidding more, then appraised value usually doesn't matter. The buyers are going to overpay.
And when appraisal value doesn't matter but market value does, what does that mean? That's when you're going to find yourself needing to do escalation, addendums, bidding over ask, and probably more than it might appraise for, appraisal gaps and all that, which we've talked about.
So that's when demand's higher than supply. But what if supply is higher than demand? Which we're not in that market right now. But if the supply is higher than demand, then now sellers have to take that into consideration. And they have to consider what's going to happen and adjust their expectations accordingly. Okay. And last but not least.
Wait, this isn't last because I added a really great one.
Did.
But number of bedrooms and number of bathrooms in the house, both.
Yeah.
Market, appraisal, it's
absolutely. Yeah.
And what was I said FSBO or having an agent.
Okay,
what
FSBO is for sale by owner. Okay, so a for sale by owner house is 9 times out of 10, it's going to affect market versus appraised. It's not going to affect appraised value, but it will affect market value, and here's why. Because the demand that goes towards that for sale by owner home is usually going to be a lot less because they don't have the marketing of an agent, they don't have the publicity, they don't have the active marketing going out there.
We're brilliant, we're sure.
Yes. But what can end up happening is if they don't get that demand, then that's going to affect what the market value of the property is. And they end up usually selling for about 20% less than a regular for sale.
That's true,
property.
they do.
Yep. Which then affects the appraised value of that neighborhood because the appraiser is going to pull tax records. And so that can actually bring property values down.
Yeah,
so.
Everything, as we're learning with everything is a cycle and everything has to trickle down and affect everyone else. So.
Okay, all right, so hopefully this wasn't too confusing or redundant.
I think you guys might have a lot of questions after that, hopefully.
Yeah, reach out to us and we'll be happy.
We'll be happy
if you reach out to us, please. Okay, we're gonna get into the market report, go into the numbers. It's gonna be kind of surprising. I took a peek at the market report, you're gonna be surprised at what we see. So let's go over to it.
I want to know.
It actually went into a buyer's market this week. let's look at the numbers. It's really interesting what's happened this week. We talked about last week, there was a little bit of an anomaly because inventory went up and buyer activity dropped a little bit. And that was a little bit of a change because typically what will happen is inventory goes up and buyer activity follows it. Inventory comes down, activity follows it the following week. So there's always like a week lag. Well, last week we had the first week, in quite some time where inventory went up and buyer activity, inventory had gone up the week prior and buyer activity came down slightly. Well, this week inventory went up again and buyer activity came down more. So let's get to the numbers so I can show this to you. So you can see here, this is our buyer activity versus inventory graph. Orange is the buyer activity, inventory is the blue, and you can see right here. So this is where the inventory had gone up. And then so we expected the following week that buyer activity would go up, but instead buyer activity actually came down just a little bit. And then buyer activity came down last week. And so, inventory came down last week. So as is typically expected, buyer activity came down this week. So what's going to be interesting to see is if this inventory influx here causes a buyer activity influx here. If that does happen, then we're going to be staying in our strong sellers market like we have been in. But right now, for the first time in quite some time, my little thing's not working. First time in quite a while, we actually crossed each other right here. So buyer activity is lower than inventory, which means that supply is actually higher than demand for this week. Again, this is a pretty significant increase in inventory. The buyer activity coming down could be a result, a show of the decreased inventory from last week, but net changes, inventory has been going up pretty significantly, and in that same time frame, buyer activity has stayed kind of flat and is actually on a downward trend the last 2 weeks. So what does that mean? Well, if you go over here to the buyer's market versus the seller's market, you can see that we've been starting to move down in this direction. And for the first time in several weeks, since around October that we've been into a buyer's market. We dipped close here, but this right here is the last time we had gone into a buyer's market. Now, here's what's important about this from a seller's perspective. Sellers' inventory is starting to go up a little bit, so you have to be strategic with your pricing. You need to make sure that you are pricing your property appropriately and your condition is good. You got to put in the effort to make sure the property shows well, or you have to lower your price so that you can compete with the buyers and with the other sellers, and you can attract the buyers to your property. From a buyer's perspective, when we hit this area right here, and this was right after the interest rate started going up, I was telling buyers that there was an opportunity in here because this was a period where there was not a lot of competition, so buyers could actually get a property without getting into bidding wars, and they could actually get inspections, and they could actually get their contingencies and everything. Well, if this continues over here, let me get rid of this, all this ink so you can see. If this pattern continues, then we might be entering another period where buyers could have a little bit of an opportunity. Now, with the interest rate news that came out last week, we don't expect interest rates to continue to go up. We expect them to kind of flatten and maybe even start coming down a little bit. So as we get into the summer, interest rates may even be coming down more. When interest rates come down, what's going to happen with buyers? The buyers that are waiting are going to flood the market. What's going to happen with the prices? You're going to get into those multiple offers. So we may be in a brief period right now of an opportunity that could be mimicking this period here, where you can get a property without multiple offers, without having to give up all your inspections and all your appraisals. So buyers, jump in the market right now. Now's the time to jump in. Sellers, it's still a good time to sell because it's still the summer season. It's still a seller's market. But for your buyer, and we expect that buyer activity to kind of come up again as inventory goes up so that the buyers have more to buy. But either way, right now, the market's actually at a normal place. That last 7 days was a normal market. So this is a good opportunity for buyers and sellers. So if you're sitting on the sideline as a buyer, don't let this pass you by again. Don't repeat the mistake from here because you only had a few weeks and then it went up. Okay, I don't anticipate it staying here for long, and you just need to respond quickly. That's why we do these weekly market reports, so as buyers and sellers, we're armed with what decisions to make, and you can move quickly. You can see that market activity has been on an upward trend. It's just that the buyer activity has kind of flattened a little bit because inventory was so far down here. Now the inventory is coming up. Buyer activity is likely going to start going up, especially if the interest rate's correct. So there's a window, there's a window right here. So take advantage of it. Give me a call so we can discuss if buying now makes sense for you. As a seller, give me a call. We can talk about selling for you as well, see how the market looks on your end. And let's just get into this. This is the time to jump in, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Please feel free to like and subscribe to this video, and please share the video so we can get it out to more people. All right, have a great day, have a great week. I'll go out there this weekend armed with this information, and let's all go out there and have a successful weekend. All right, we'll see you next week.